Hi everyone, the Partial Prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so today I want to talk about the year 2025. And is that the year we're going to see Jesus the Christmas King? Okay, so just some background. So 3 previous videos I did one on 2020, the year of the two witnesses, and that's when we saw Trump and Netanyahu um, had their 6 peace deals. Most of them were in 2020. I think there was one in early 2021. So that's what happened in 2020. And then in 2021, my video, I called it the year of the beast from the sea, because I definitely think Biden's the beast from the sea. But I also could have called it the year of the 7th king, because I believe Biden is the 7th king. Trump is the 6th king. And because that number 7 would go with 21, because 21 is 7 plus 7 plus 7. So, and 2021 was the first year of Biden, okay? And so then, so then he's had, 4 years since then. And then I did another video about this year, 2024, being the year of the 8th king. And so then you see there with 24, connecting to the number 8, okay? And this has really come true that we've seen, Trump, they talk about his big comeback during the election, this year in 2024. And so it really has been the year of the 8th king. And then, so those are videos that I made that you could go look back if you're interested. So I got to thinking, well, is there something about the years that connects to Obama's term? And so Obama would have been the 5th king, or is the 5th king. And his years were 2009 to 2017. And I didn't see anything connected to 5, but what I did find is if you take 17 and add it to 9, you get 26, and then 26 divided by 2 equals 13, and we've seen the number 13 show up. It showed up in various places connected to Obama. So, and I wasn't making videos at the time of Obama, so there's probably a bunch of stuff that I just didn't really recognize while he was president. But then I just also noticed this. So if you take 2017 and you add those numbers up, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's 10. And then you could take 10 and divide them by 2 and get the 5, with him being the 5th president, or king, sorry. So there we go. I didn't even notice that before. So, so sometimes talking about these things, you start to recognize things. So that's what I'm wondering, is 2025 going to be the year of Jesus, the Christmas King? I'm hoping. And so I've said this many times too, that I'm not looking for a rapture as it's been traditionally taught. I'm looking for the return of Jesus. Okay? And so, so Christmas is December 25th, 2024. And Christmas, the date for Christmas actually gets a lot of flack. Because people don't believe that Jesus was actually born on December 25th. And that it's just a date that the churches may have come up with. And I really think the history is kind of lost as to where that date came in. Um, and so people that claim that they know why the church picked it could really be wrong about that. Um, and that it just maybe comes from a anti Christian or anti Christmas view. Um, um, but um, we see, and so I'm wondering actually too, like maybe God put that date on the hearts and minds of the Christians, because maybe it really is a future date that's important. Um, um, so that's a possibility. So so the reason why I'm looking at 2025 and Jesus being the Christmas King is because Christmas is on the 25th. Okay, so we got that 25 number there. And the it's interesting because that date actually does show up in the Bible. In Jeremiah 52:31, it says, "Now it came about in the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 25th of the month, that evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the first year of his reign, showed favor to Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and brought him out of prison." So, I mean, so obviously when this was written, the 12th month on the 25th month would have been a Hebrew date. But if you understand prophecy, some of these dates could actually relate to Gregorian dates, that they're prophetic shadows that are hidden in the text. So I thought I would bring that up, that date actually does show up in scripture. And then I thought I'd bring up this Christmas song, because it's one of the ones I really like. I really like the words from it, because it's O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. And so if you're like me, you might be feeling the heaviness of our slavery, that the world's gotten really difficult to live in, that God's enemies have really made a mess of this country, and especially after 4 years of the left. Well, I mean, actually, you could say 12 years if you take the 8 years of Obama, too. That with things like open borders and other policies like just all of the unchecked spending of Biden has caused inflation to just go crazy, and so things cost a lot of money at the store. Prices are high. And I just hear stories all the time about how things are hard for people, and then we have two like food recalls are happening, like just incredibly a lot. And so I don't know all the reasons for kind of the breakdown of our society, but it's really been broken down. And God actually talks about that in the book of Haggai. He talks about like who has seen the temple before and how do you see it now. And I see the country as a type of temple. When you take the definition of a temple as being a place where you worship God, America would really be like the Christian temple, and then you have Israel would be like the Jewish temple, in a manner of speaking. And so I don't need, so many prophets are waiting for, they don't think Jesus can come back because, they haven't seen the Antichrist go into the temple, and, declare himself to be God, because they're looking for an actual physical temple rather than, a country, which could be like a temple of God. And so that's why I believe, I'm kind of jumping ahead. I have a slide coming up where I was going to talk about this, but that's why I believe that we can see the coming of Jesus sooner, rather than having to wait for things to happen in the Middle East, so that a temple gets built. And the thing about it too is that people don't recognize that, I mean, it's Jesus that's going to rebuild the temple. So, I mean, which would actually include rebuilding the country of America and the country of Israel. And so I'm looking right now. Let's see. Okay, so it's in Haggai 2. It says, okay, so this is God talking to Zerubbabel, through Haggai, and he says, "Who's left among you who saw this temple in its former glory, and how do you see it now? Does it not seem to you like nothing in comparison?" And so, I definitely think that's really true about America, that, this was the place that really reflected the glory of God, and that it's really gotten to be a dark, fallen place. And so that's why we need the Messiah to come and ransom, his people. And and that's the other thing I wanted to point out too, where it says ransom captive Israel. Now, a lot of times, people look at the prophecies in the Bible and think they only apply to the Jewish nation. Whenever God's talking about Israel in the scriptures, and they don't recognize that there's the history of Israel was, at some point there was a division between the 10 tribes and the 2.5 tribes, and the 10 tribes are considered to be missing, but obviously we know God knows where they are. And I really think the 10 tribes that broke off and became the northern kingdom of Israel, are now, what's, the church. And so I think, a lot of those 10 tribes would be here in America. And see, so it's interesting because in scripture, the 10 tribes would be the northern kingdom. And so it's interesting that we're in North America here. So I do think that's a prophetic shadow fulfillment. And, so I believe that God has two countries, that he considers, his, and it's America and Israel. And so a lot of times, if people don't believe that, it could be that they have kind of an antichrist spirit, in them. Because it's interesting, because Iran, they call America the great Satan, and they call Israel the small Satan. And so they know, like, because they have, the spirit of the devil in them, telling them, I mean, they hate these two countries because of that evil spirit in them. And so that's really got to be a clue to us as to, who, what's really, God's nations. Okay, if the enemy hates it so much, there must be something to that. So that's the deal with that. And so happy holidays, everyone. There's so much intersecting at this time. Okay. And just so much going on. It's just crazy. I definitely think we see a lot of signs that are pointing that we're in the last days. Okay. And hopefully the last of the last of the last days. And so what's very interesting this year is that Christmas, the day of Christmas, is also Hanukkah Eve. Okay, so the start of the 8-day holiday of Hanukkah starts on Christmas Day. Okay, so that's a really interesting intersection. Okay, so definitely that makes it a really high watch day. Okay, and so the Jewish people would be lighting their first candle of Hanukkah that evening. On Christmas. And so, an interesting thought is that if, Jesus were to come back on that day, he would be making both Christians and Jews happy. And, and not really like favoring one or the other religion. So that's a thought about the possible intersection there. So yeah. So anyways, Merry Christmas and then Happy Hanukkah. I celebrate both, so okay. And so let's look at these dates, okay, because there is a lot intersecting, okay. And so we have December, let's talk about December 24th, okay, in 2024. So what's interesting is like 12, 24, 2024, you would have like 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, so that's interesting, because that number 12 obviously is an important number in the Bible. And one of the things is we get the numbers 21 and 24 in the book of Daniel in chapter 10. And so 21 sticks out. I think I already mentioned this, is 777. Okay. So definitely a connection to the seventh king, a connection to Biden. Okay. And Daniel 10 is where it talks about like the Prince of Persia, like was bugging me for 21 days. So that's what that number, how that number shows up. And then we see the number 24 in that same chapter where Daniel has a messianic encounter. And I think that could be a shadow of him having a kind of a false messianic encounter with the beast from the earth, because his face falls on the ground. And so the what's interesting about the number 24 is that it could be 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, or it could be 8 plus 8 plus 8. So that would connect it to the sixth king that becomes the eighth king, which I believe is Trump. And then we see also too in Haggai that it talks about the number 24 twice. Okay. So in verse 18 it says, "Do consider from this day onward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, from the day when the temple of the Lord was founded, consider." And then we see in verse 20, it says, "Then the word of the Lord came a second time to Haggai on the 24th day of the month, saying, ... And so what's interesting about the month of December is that, so Christmas Eve is December 24th, and then the next day on Christmas, we get a second 24 in the Hebrew date, a Kislev 24. So we got two 24s right next to each other. Okay. So is that significant? We'll find out. Okay. And then there's a lot of other things that I found connected to December 24th. So December 24th is 49 days or 7 weeks after 11/6. Okay. So remember the election was 11/5 and 11/6 is when they declared Trump the winner of the election. Okay. And so what's interesting about 11/6 is that you got that number 6 there that connects to Trump. But the number 11 too is really interesting because that's the number of judgment. Okay. And so Trump was elected the 47th president, and 47 adds up to 11. Okay. So 12/24 is 7 weeks after 11/6. It's 13 days after 12/12. So 12/12, December 12th, was definitely a very interesting date because the Hebrew date is Kislev 11, which is 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar. Okay, so I'm always paying attention to the 9/11 dates. Okay. And that is actually Biden's Hebrew birthday. Okay, when you do the conversion. And so what was interesting about that day was that was when Biden pardoned a bunch of people, probably a bunch of criminals. So that's what happened on that day. So it's interesting that it was 12/12. And then what's interesting about the 13 number is that we're in the 12th month. And in Esther, we read about the 12th month and the 13th day. And then we read about the 12th month and the 14th day. So the 12th month, 13th day. So those are actually connected to the holiday of Purim. And so they actually have fighting on the 13th and the 14th of the 12th month in the book of Esther. And then they have celebrations, 2 celebrations in a row too. And so it's just interesting how it connects to, it fits in really well with the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So 13 days after 12/12 is December 24th. And then another thing too, okay, so this was interesting to me, is that December 24th is 62 weeks after Biden was in Israel. Okay, so remember the war started in Israel on October 7th, and then Biden, probably imagining himself to be a messianic type figure, wanting to bring peace to the world, is seriously whatever. He went and made a trip, like the first one of his presidency, I believe, to Israel. So I'm trying to remember what that date is. It was October, I think it was October 13th of last year. We were probably all thinking like he's going to go and he's going to give Israel advice about fighting their war. But really what his purpose was he wanted to talk to Israel about making sure that they were all nice, played nice to the Palestinians. And so his priority was not Israel, the American ally Israel, but his priority was the Palestinians, which really kind of shows you where his heart is. He's definitely like Obama's son, okay, in thought and actions. Okay, here we go. I found the date. It's October 18th. Okay. Okay, so Biden visits Israel to discuss humanitarian needs of civilians in Gaza. Okay. So Israel goes to war. What is Biden's primary concern? It's not Israel. Okay. So that was 62 weeks ago, or that will be 62 weeks on December 24th. Okay. And so we find that number um, in the book of Daniel. And I think I have those verses in here. And then, okay, so then on December 25th, okay, so I already talked about how December 25th is Kislev 24 on the Hebrew calendar. So what's interesting about December 25th is that December 25th is 50 days after 11/6, after they declared Trump the winner of the election. Well, 50 days, that's an interesting number because it connects to like Pentecost. And then, and then like I said before too, it's 14 days after 12/12, which would connect to those dates in the book of Esther, the 12th month, the 14th day, where they had fighting on the 14th day. I think that's how it works. And then they celebrated on the 15th. And then on December 25th, it's 62 days from Simchat Torah. Okay, so what's interesting this year is that some of the key Jewish holidays happened on the 25th of the Gregorian calendar. So Simchat Torah, which is when they would celebrate the Torah, which is definitely a huge messianic shadow of the Messiah, with Jesus being the Word, celebrating the Word of God and Simchat Torah. So that was on October 25th. Okay. And then December 25th is 9 months from Shushan Purim. Okay, so Purim was actually on 3/24, but then the second day of Purim is called Shushan Purim. And just the way I've seen it kind of play out in prophecy, there, I think there's a connection with Shushan Purim to America. Okay, and so that happened on 3/25. And then the New Year for trees, way back in January, on January 25th, that would be 11 months before Christmas. Okay, so definitely all very interesting. And then, oh, okay, and so then in Haggai 2, okay, so I put in the full verses of the 18, verse 18 and verse 19, because it says, "Do consider from this day onward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, from the day when the temple of the Lord was founded, consider, is the seed still in the barn, even including the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree? It is not borne fruit. Yet from this day on I will bless you." Okay. So just an emphasis of there's blessing. At some point God's going to bless his people on the first day of Hanukkah, and hopefully that's this year. So because really, like the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, the olive tree, being pictures of his people, we haven't borne fruit, and so we do need God's blessing to restore fruitfulness into our lives. And then, okay, so with 12/25 being 50 days after 11/6, you can see a picture there of the 1335 number. Okay. And so we get that number from Daniel 12:12, where I think if you take the 1 and the 3 and the 3 and make that weeks, like you have 1 week, which would, the first week would be the week of the election, and then you have 3 weeks and then 3 more weeks, for a total of 7 weeks. And then the number 5 falling on Christmas would be connected to the 50th day. Okay. And so we read in Daniel 12. Okay, so in Daniel 12:11, it says, from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1290 days. And then Daniel 12:12 says, how blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to 1335 days. Okay, so like I said, 1335 could be a time frame of 7 weeks plus 1 day. Okay, and so with the 1290 days, okay, first of all, 1290, I have 4 different dates, and I'll show you on a slide coming up where they come from, but one of them shows up on 1212, and so it's interesting that it's talked about in Daniel 12:11, and then with Daniel 12:12 following, and actually sometimes the Hebrew Bible does the numbering different, so it would be interesting to see if maybe 1330 or 1290 actually ends up being the 12th verse. I don't know, we would have to see. But 12:12:24 is 1290 days from 6/2/21. Okay, so what's significant about 6/2/21? That was actually the 70th week after the deal of the century, and that was when both Trump and Netanyahu were like out. Okay, Netanyahu was voted out of Israel on that date, and I think that was the date that Trump was banned from Facebook and Instagram. I don't know, whichever social media platforms. Trump was already out as president because Biden was in by that time. But then they actually really further kicked him out by taking away the social media platforms where he communicated a lot. And then, but also too with 1290, it also shows up on 8/9/23. So 1290 days after the deal of the century to the Saudi deal is 1290 days. Okay. And so when you think about okay, from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination and the AOD is set up, there would be 1290 days. Okay, so what does it mean that the regular sacrifice is abolished? Okay, so with the deal of the century, that could be maybe a prophetic shadow of Trump was trying to divide the land. And then, because we saw with the Saudi deal, if you see that, think about that day being the AOD setup, the abomination of desolation being set up, it really was kind of a setup for the war in Israel. That one of the causes, people were blaming the Saudi deal as one of the reasons why Israel's enemies wanted to go to war, because they saw these countries normalizing with Israel, and it made them nervous. And so then they wanted to rise up against Israel. So because basically they were seeing Israel kind of building up a bunch of allies, making them more powerful. So that's what we got going on there. And then so I've talked about Back to the Future before. I definitely think there's a lot of prophetic shadows in there. Um, and so what's interesting is that, so we have the one scene where Marty goes to the mall um, at the beginning to go meet the doc, um, which is interesting. The doc is called Doc, um, short for Deal of the Century. And when he first goes to meet Doc, it's the Twin Pines Mall, and we see the date changing from 115 to 116. Okay, well, the reason why that's interesting is that um, it's like the date changing from you could see kind of a hidden 11.5 there, and then changing to 11.6. Okay, so that would be connected to the election. Okay. Um, but then after Marty was in the past and returns to the future, he returns to the mall at 1:33 a.m. The mall is now called the Lone Pine Mall because he ran over one of the pines on, and look at the date, he ran over the pine on 11/5 in 1955. Okay. So we see that, a second time we see that 11/5 date. Okay. And then Marty returns to the mall right when Doc is being shot by the Libyans. Um, so then what's interesting is that, um, the Lone Pine Mall. So then it goes from like two trees to one tree. Okay. Um, and that could be a picture of, what if Trump and Biden are the twin pines, okay, which would connect to all the twin stories in the Bible. Um, and then it changes to the lone pine, where the lone pine would just be Jesus, okay, which is such a 9/11 picture too. You have the twin towers, and then they go away, and then it's just the one tower. Um, um, and then it's interesting too that it's one the lone pine tree, the one pine tree, so like the pine tree on Christmas, so that would be really interesting if that was a prophetic connection there. um so and so Marty is 5 letters, so that's where you get the 5. Okay, and I don't know if you can kind of see, he's kind of in shadow there, but he's to the right of the sign walking by, and so he would make the 5. Okay, and then what's interesting is you see Doc holding up his hands, his right and his left hand, so that connects to Daniel 12. And then what's interesting is Doc gets shot by the Libyans, but it gets turned to the contrary because he has a bulletproof vest. Okay. In the future, the second time around, I mean, the first time he actually really gets killed. So, but the past changes. Okay, because of Marty going into the past. Okay. So, anyways, and so then, so I put this in here too, where you'd see how 116, when you flip it over, it's a hidden 9/11. Okay. So definitely interesting. So 9/11 and 11/6 hidden clues. Okay, so then on December 24th, let's see. So Daniel 9:25, so I highlighted 25, and it says, "So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." Okay. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. So, okay, so one thought I had is, it says, "So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem." So one of the things that they've been saying about the election with Trump winning is that it's a mandate to Trump saying, hey, they don't like the way the left's doing things, and so they want Trump to come in and rebuild America. Okay, election win was voters saying they want to fix America. Okay, and so from that decree, the issuing of that decree until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Okay, and so I already said that December 24th is 62 weeks after Biden was in Israel. It's also 6 months, 2 years after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So that's kind of a hidden 62 there. Okay. What's interesting is that that's like a connection to Haggai 1:15. Okay, let me see if I can get that here. Which says, okay, yeah. Oh, so that's where it comes from. In Haggai 1, it's talking about on the 24th day of the 6th month in the 2nd year of Darius the king. It says, verse 14 says, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel and the spirit of Joshua, and they came and worked on the house of the Lord of hosts, their God, on the 24th day of the 6th month in the 2nd year of Darius the king. And so the first time you see that date, there's actually a connection to Roe v. Wade being overturned. Okay, because, it says the 2nd year of Darius the king. That happened in 2022, which was the 2nd year of Biden. Okay. And then it was the 24th day of the 6th month, June 24th. Okay, that's when Roe v. Wade was overturned. But then now we're seeing so 2 years after that date and 2 years and 6 months after that date brings us to Christmas Eve. Okay, so definitely very interesting. So kind of like that date in Haggai, there's 2 different fulfillments. And then it says it will be built again. Okay, so what's going to be built again? So one thought was Donald Trump's cabinet. Okay, but also it could be connecting, it says it'll be built again, that could be connected to America. So it says with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Okay, so plaza would be like the city or the downtown area. Moat, I went and looked up that word. One of the meanings of that word means gold. Okay. So one thought I had is maybe it's saying, okay, like the city, when I read about the city, we read about the city in connected to Babylon in Revelation 17. Okay. So a lot of times when I read about the city in prophecy, I connect it to Biden. Okay. And then what's interesting with the moat being connected to gold, obviously riches are connected to Trump. Okay. So what if it's saying, because what we saw with, Donald Trump, lost his power, but then God restored it to him. And then sort of the same thing with Biden. It was like, they kicked him out of the campaign. And so in a way it was like, he was kind of losing his power, but then he kind of rallied. Okay. And and has been doing stuff since then, because kind of like, obviously, because I think because he's angry, and so he's got a lot of motivation to try to do things before he loses, because his time is short. Okay. So he's trying to get a lot done before he has to leave office. Okay. And so then what we have is, and so what we're seeing right now is we kind of have 2 kings right now in America. We have Biden and Trump at, kind of happening at the same time. Okay. Like Trump rebuilding his cabinet at the same time that Biden had rallied and has his agenda. Okay. And so that connects to the verse of about the prophecy about the Messiah. So in Isaiah 7:14 it says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. He will eat curds and honey at the time he knows enough to refuse evil and choose good. For before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken." Okay. So before the coming of the Messiah, we're going to see two kings, their land forsaken. Okay. Two kings like losing leadership. Now, we've already seen a fulfillment of that in Israel because they have killed off the leader of Hezbollah and they killed off the leader of Hamas. Okay. So we don't have to wait for that to be fulfilled. It's been fulfilled in both Israel and, well, I guess we haven't seen it yet in America. We need to see kind of the falling of Trump and Biden in America. But we're at a time with two kings in America. And then so that connects to that when Noah was building his ark, there's the verse that talks about the two unclean animals, okay, two beasts, okay. The animals kind of come into the ark two by two, and that would connect to the two beasts in Revelation, the beast from the earth and the beast from the sea, okay. So then the Lord said to Noah, "Enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this time. You shall take with you of every clean animal by sevens, a male and his female." So that could be a prophetic shadow of like 7 synagogues and the 7 churches that we read about in Revelation. And then, because the males connect to the Jewish people, the females connect to the church. And then it says, "Of the animals that are not clean, too, a male and his female." So is that Biden and Trump and their followers? Then it says, "Also of the birds of the sky by sevens, male and female." So the number 7 there could connect to the Messiah. "To keep offspring alive on the face of the earth. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made." Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. So I have this sign that I hang up that says, "Today I will not worry unless the animals start lining up 2 by 2." Okay, well, one, I don't think we have to worry. But I do think we are in a day where the animals are lining up 2 by 2. We have the two beasts, okay, right now. And see, this is the thing too about the prophets of the day. They don't recognize that that we have two beasts. We have two people right now in America in leadership that are fulfilling the prophecies of the two beasts of Revelation. Okay, so then in Daniel 9:27 we read, "And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate." Okay, so you could take the 1 week and make that 7 weeks, okay? And so, I talked about how it's 7 weeks from November 6th through to December 24th, okay? And And so it's really true that in the middle of those 7 weeks, so like the fourth week was when Biden, etc., et al., put together the Lebanon ceasefire. Okay. And that would be like Biden's third quote unquote peace deal that he did as president. Okay. So the first one was like the Saudi deal, even though that kind of fell apart because of the war. The second one would be the hostage deal that he made early on in the war to get some hostages released. And then now this third one, the Lebanon ceasefire. Okay. And so now, to me, that's a fulfillment of prophecy because Noah sent the dove out 3 times. Okay. So, I don't think we need any more peace deals from Biden, because he's had 3 of them. Okay. To fulfill prophecy. Okay. And then, but also you could take from 1217 to 1223. You could have a 1 week time frame, and then that would make the 24th, December 24th, day 8, and December 25th, day 9. Okay, which the day 8 would connect to, so it would make 1217 and 1223 a type of Sukkot, and this is actually repeating the dates, the Gregorian dates that we see in, I think it was September. Let me think. Oh no, maybe it was October. Yeah, so in October, okay, so what's interesting is October is the 10th month, okay, but December could be it used to be the 10th month before they added January and February, okay, and so if we're repeating the pattern of Sukkot from the 10th month in October, Sukkot was October 17th to the 23rd, and then the 8th day was October 24th, and then the 9th day was October 25th. And so it's interesting how that really lays on top of the calendar in December. Okay. And so you could connect the 8th day, the 24th, to Trump, and then the 25th day would be, connect to Simchat Torah. Okay. Which I said is definitely a huge messianic feast, celebrating Jesus, the Word. And then, where I was wondering too, would Trump being the 8th king, if then the Messiah would be the 9th king? Okay, so that's why the Messiah would connect to the 9th day. Okay. And then, so what's interesting, like in the middle of that week, you could see that Trump, from 1217 to 1223, Trump was trying to stop the budget. So he was trying to put a stop to sacrificing grain offerings. You could say, in a sense. I just on the calendar. So that could be a second fulfillment of that verse. Okay, besides the one where, in the middle of the 7 weeks, Biden had a ceasefire. Okay. Okay. And then, so I wanted to talk about the Santa Claus movies. I really wish I had time to do a whole video because I think there's a lot of prophetic shadows in those movies too. Okay. And one of the biggest things is that it's kind of like the big question of who is Santa Claus in those movies, or who's going to be Santa Claus, or people fighting to become Santa Claus or steal his job. So what's interesting in the first movie, Scott Calvin, played by Tim Allen, he's a businessman who becomes the new Santa by putting on his coat. Okay, well, we see in scripture that coat is a picture of someone's authority. Okay. And so like Joseph with his multicolored coat is Joseph with authority. Okay. And that's why his brothers wanted to steal his coat from him. Okay. Um, and so I thought that was interesting with the Santa Claus is that it's like a businessman becoming Santa would be a picture of like Trump, um, the businessman, becoming a type of Santa or a type of a messianic figure. Um, um, so we see that in the first movie, and then in the second movie, there's a plastic toy Santa tries to steal Santa's job, and it's funny because he's running around going, "Boo! I am Santa Claus," um, which is just hilarious. But it's funny because I think it's just a picture of. I mean, we see that in this day and age where we have all these presidents running around. I mean, like in a way, they'd be saying, "Boo! I'm Jesus," um, acting like messianic figures, so we had Trump and Biden doing that. Um, and I mean, I guess there's other people too doing that. Um, and then in the third movie, we have Jack Frost is stealing Santa's job. And then the closing credits song, and so that movie to me is really interesting because we actually have Jack Frost fighting with Scott Calvin. They're fighting because they're trying to get the coat. They're trying to steal the coat or whatever. Because whoever has the coat is Santa Claus. Okay. And then what's really interesting in that movie, it's like Santa or Scott Calvin holds Jack Frost down and says, "Okay, the coat really belongs to that guy." And he's talking about, you know, himself from the past getting the coat. And I thought that was a really prophetic scene because it'd be like Trump and Biden fighting each other. And then it's like they're saying, well, the real Santa or the real Messiah is Jesus. Um, and so at the end of that movie, in the closing credits, the song that they play is "I'm the Real Santa." And so that's really the big question in our day and age: who is the real Santa, or who is the real Messiah? Okay, and obviously it's Jesus, and obviously God is going to answer that question for us. Okay, um, but we have a lot of people following the wrong Messiah. Okay, um, and then for Christmas we have the nativity scene, okay, which connects to, so there's this picture all throughout scripture of, Jesus with the two thieves on the cross, um, one on the right and one on the left. With the nativity scene, we see, Jesus is always in the middle with somebody on the right and somebody on the left. And, so with the nativity scene, I think that's a picture of the Messianic kingdom where you have Jesus in the middle, and then you have Mary would represent the church on one side, and Joseph would represent the Jewish people on the other side, on the two hands of Jesus. And then, so Home Alone 2. So the Home Alone movies are big Christmas movies that are playing these days. Oh, and so what was interesting about the Santa Claus is that it was actually, the first movie was actually played on ABC on the night of December 22nd. Okay. So thought that was interesting. I mean, the reason why they were doing it is because they wanted to promote Tim Allen's new TV show that's coming up in January. And then, but we've also been seeing Home Alone has been playing a lot, especially on Freeform. And so we see this kind of this repeat of this picture of, like Jesus with the two thieves, one on the one side and one on the other. There's a repeat there's 2 times that I see a picture in Home Alone 2 of a repeat of that picture. And so here we have Kevin McAllister is kind of like standing in the middle of the Twin Towers in New York. Okay. Um, so obviously it's kind of freaky to be watching these older movies and the Towers are there. Um, and, so I think Home Alone 2 has some prophetic shadows too. Because that's the movie where, so Kevin McAllister gets lost in New York and then he actually does bump into Trump at the hotel, at the Plaza Hotel. So definitely very interesting. And then here's another picture with Kevin McAllister, and he's got an angel on his right and an angel on his left. So definitely interesting. So here's kind of a more graphic picture of 2 thieves and Jesus, which connects to, so Jesus and the 2 criminals connects to Joseph in jail with the cupbearer and the baker. Okay. And then we also see it like in Nehemiah 8:4, we have Ezra is standing at a wooden podium, and then he has 6 people on his right hand, which connects to Trump, the 6th king. And then Ezra has 7 people on his left hand, which connects to Biden, the 7th king. Okay. You can't make this stuff up. It works out great. Okay. I mean, so these are the shadows that God has in his word. Okay. And then these are the verses that talk about Jesus and the 2 criminals. Luke 23:32. 2 others also, who were criminals, were being led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right and the other on the left. Okay, and so this slide I was actually wanting to do. I was working on. I was going to make a video called "The Antichrist Won't Be Named Damien and Other Ways the Prophets Are Getting It Wrong." And so I was going to talk about how they're looking for an actual physical temple to be built rather than seeing America and Israel as the temples. And then they're not seeing where like Trump and Biden are setting themselves up in either America or Israel and saying, I am the Messiah, or I'm the, oh, well, they're not using the words like I'm the Messiah, but we definitely see it really strongly with Trump, where he's like, he believes, since God saved him from being shot, he believes that God saved him so that he could save America and quite possibly the world, is what he said. Okay. So we see Trump setting himself up as a type of Messiah. So anyways, and so, and then like I said, people aren't seeing that, Trump's fulfilling the beasts from the earth, and then Biden's fulfilling the beasts from the sea. Because one of the things with Trump, okay, so the beast from the earth is the 666 guy, okay? So I really see that, Trump building his cabinet is him fulfilling those 666 verses, okay? And because the people that he's picking to build his cabinet aren't the Christians. Like, the Christians really got kicked out of the Republican Party when Trump decided that they weren't going to have a pro-life platform anymore. And then now all the people that are being picked for Trump's cabinet are all the people that have done him favors, and stuff like that. So it's all people that are, definitely willing to say good things about Trump. And so that would leave a lot of Christians out. um, um, and then, so it's interesting that Trump's, got people like Elon Musk. So what I believe is that Trump and Elon Musk and others are like the firstborn, and God has been blessing the firstborn. And, I kind of say that with quotes around firstborn, um, because we see in the scriptures that there's pictures of at some point the firstborn who has leadership, there's a reversal with who gets the firstborn position. Like we see that in the story of Jacob, that Jacob buys the position, or no, wait, how's that work? I guess he buys it with, with the cup of stew from Esau. Um, and so just, um, I mean, definitely all throughout with the Jacob's sons, there's always kind of the question of who's going to be the firstborn and who's going to have the rightful place. And then we see when Jacob was blessing his grandchildren, he switches the right and the left hand. And so that the firstborn then becomes the secondborn, and the secondborn then becomes the firstborn. So that's what's going on with that. And then, like, John Haller, one of the things he said, the reason why he doesn't think, okay, wait, let me read this verse to you, okay, because so I wrote false prophets. In Haggai 1:2, we read, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, this people says, the time has not come, even the time for the house of the Lord to be rebuilt." And so so like I said, I'm seeing all these people on YouTube that are like, okay, the coming of Jesus is, like maybe 4 years from now, like after the time of Trump, or 2030, which, what is that, like 6 years from now? That they don't see that it's possible that we could be in the day and hour of Jesus returning, because they're still expecting things that they don't realize are being fulfilled in prophecy. Because one of the things for John Heller is that he doesn't see the fulfillment of the 10 horns. Okay. And I've talked about the 10 horns being kind of like the military branch. And so what we saw with Obama and Biden is like, the BLM rioters would definitely be connected to Obama. That they would be the 10 horns. Okay. And then they've kind of morphed into the pro-Palestinian protesters. Okay. And then with Trump, we saw his 10 horns would be the people, the January 6th rioters. Okay. Because the cupbearer takes the grapes of wrath and squishes them into the cup of Pharaoh, which is a picture of like giving them authority. Well, we read in Revelation where the beast gives these 10 horns authority for 1 hour. Okay. So the cupbearer squeezes them into the cup. And that's what we got Trump doing right now, is he's squeezing the grapes of wrath into the cup of authority right now, giving them all positions of authority. Okay. And so that they're getting the 666 number, either on their wrist, on their right hand, which is interesting, or their forehead. So because they're either doing things to help Trump out, which would connect to the hand, or they're thinking that Trump's a messianic type figure, they're ascribing messianism to him, and that would connect to the forehead. And so I wanted to bring up this picture. Okay, so we read about Jacob in Genesis 32, and it says he arose that same night. And okay, so Jacob was leaving Laban, okay, and going back to the land. And it says, now he arose that same night and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. he took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And so in the middle here, I put in the Jewish translation, and their numbering is a little different than ours. So for verse 24, which connects to our verse 23, they translated to say, and he took them and brought them across the stream, and he took across what was his. And then their commentary on that is, what was his? They say the animals and the movables. He made himself like a ferryman, taking from here and depositing there. So what we see is Jacob going from one side of the creek or the river to the other side. He's switching from the left bank to the right bank, and then back to the left bank, and then, so back and forth. Okay. And so what I think that is a picture of is how in America, so we read about in Daniel 12 where it says many will go back and forth. Okay. And so in America, we've been going back and forth between left and right. Okay. And it's gotten really obvious especially with Trump, of how different the left and the right are, so everything so we've kind of been going through this whiplash kind of thing, switching from left politicians to right politicians. And so I believe that this is like a prophetic shadow of what's going to be happening, or what's been happening in the last days, is that we've been going back and forth between left and right. Okay, Obama was left, Trump was right, Biden's left, Trump, we're back to right again. And then what's interesting is verse 24 says, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So I thought it was interesting that was verse 24. Okay. And so Jacob being left alone, I mean, that could be a picture of Biden being left alone. And then the man wrestling with him could be Trump, or it could be a picture of, the Messiah being the lone pine. And then the man wrestling with him until daybreak would be a picture of, because I told you that Trump and his followers, after they fight with the left, are going to go after, because this is what scripture says, after Messiah and his followers, until Jesus wipes them out with his breath. So there's a connection to this picture to Daniel 12:4, because it says, but as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Then I, Daniel, looked. Okay, so there's that back and forth verse, Daniel 12:4. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others were standing, one on this bank of the river and the other on that bank of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be until the end of these wonders? I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time and half a time. And as soon as they finished shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. Okay, so many prophetic pictures in these verses. Okay, so the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river. So this man was in, this man was in the middle, okay? And then with the bank on the one side and the bank on the other. And also he's above the waters, like he's not a part of the beast of the sea, okay? Remember they threw Joseph into a pit and there's no water in it, okay? Because he's not connected to the beast from the sea. And then, so this was kind of a heavenly person, okay, in the middle of the river, okay, above the waters of the river. And then he set, he raises his right hand and his left hand, so that connects to that picture of Doc, when he's being shot by the Libyans, he has his right hand and his left hand up. And then, so this man who's dressed in linen, who's, probably a picture of Jesus, swears that it's for a time, and half a time. So that, I believe, connects to Biden's 42 months, which is time times and half a time, 3.5 years. Okay. And then it says, as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people. I mean, we're pretty powerless right now. I don't know what else would need to happen for that to be fulfilled. But obviously before Biden leaves office, he's going to try to, shatter as much of, the power as much as he can, both of, Americans and, the left, the right too. He's going to do stuff so Trump doesn't get, power over certain things when he comes into office. So, so that's the picture that, we've been boomeranging between left and right. And then God tells us, don't go either left or right. Okay. And then in Luke 22, we also said, and there arose also a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. Okay, that was the disciples in Jesus' day. But we saw that with Trump and Harris campaigning for the election. Who's better, right or left? But we still have seen that going on, even after the election. Okay, the right and left are still, disputing with each other. Okay, as to who's better. And then the other thing that's been going on in this day and age, on December 7th, Notre Dame had a type of resurrection. Okay. And so Notre Dame means Our Lady, which could connect to the church. And so I'm thinking, I couldn't figure it out until now, until I saw the resurrection of the of the church, what it meant. But the spire that burnt up and fell in the fire could be a picture of Jesus, because it's like in the middle. Okay. And it wasn't near the two towers, okay, where the two towers could connect to Biden and Trump. Okay, so the spire was not near the two towers, it was in the middle. It falls and has to be rebuilt. Okay. I mean, and there was some too about the fire being an 11th month warning about the coronavirus. Too, that was another way the church was going to fall, or maybe, America fall with the coronavirus. Okay. Because the coronavirus too could be a part of the downfall of America too. Okay. But then what we saw with the rebuilding of Notre Dame is that the forest is rebuilt. Well, I mean, they put the spire back up and then they rebuild. So the forest would be like the wooden roof around the spire. And they call it the forest probably because it's made out of wood. And so the forest definitely connects to a picture of God's people, and so like rebuilding, God's people. And then what's interesting about Notre Dame is that it's 9 letters. Okay, so remember I told you 9 could connect to the Messiah being the 9th king. And then the 42 months, so 12, 25, 24 is 42 months, 24 days from 6/2/21. And I told you 6/2/21 was the 70th week, when that was definitely like the fall of Trump and Netanyahu, after the deal of the century, the 70th week after the deal of the century. I mean, obviously, Netanyahu came back, like 2 years ago. on December 1st. And then now we're seeing the return of Trump. And and that's just because God's just going to give them a time to fill up the fullness of their sin before he brings judgment on them. And so what we see in Revelation 13:5, that the beast from the sea only gets authority to act for 42 months. Okay. So we could be nearing the end of, if God's counting the 42 months from when we switched from left to right, or wait, I said that wrong, from right to left, then, Biden's time is almost over. So like 42 months, I mean, you could go all the way up to, 24, like you could go up to like 42 months and 30 days kind of thing. So let's see. So 24 on Christmas. I mean, so that would mean like something would maybe have to happen before the first of the year, because then you're switching into 43 months. So maybe if that's the date that God's counting from. So we'll see what happens with that. And then I talked about this in a previous video, that I think there's a resurrection of the wicked before a resurrection of God's people. And we've already seen that with Trump, like a resurrection, he has had a resurrection type event with this election. We're seeing a return of a resurrection of the followers of Trump. Because we read in 1 Thessalonians 4, it says that we who are alive and remain will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout and the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So that could be the terrors, the unbelievers, okay? I mean, there's the surface meaning, but then there's also the prophetic shadows, okay? And so those who have fallen asleep, obviously the literal meaning is, those who died, the Christians who have died. But the prophetic shadow is that, those who have fallen asleep and are those who are following false messiahs, okay? And so they'll rise first, okay? Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up. And the alive and remain connects to the 1335 days in Daniel 12, okay? Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we shall always be with the Lord. Okay. And so remember, the harvesters are on the clouds. Okay. So it's a harvest picture of the wheat and the chaff. Okay. And there's two different clouds, like Trump's on one cloud and then Messiah's on his, cloud. And so which harvester will you join? Okay. And then we read about the day of the Lord being like a thief in the night. Okay. In 1 Thessalonians 5. And let's see. What should we say about these verses? Okay, so while they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. Okay. And then it goes on to say, let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. Okay, so for those who sleep, they're sleeping at night. So that would be a picture of Trump's peeps. Okay. And then those who get drunk at night would be a picture of Biden's peeps, which connects to the Belshazzar story in Daniel. But since we are of the day, let us be sober. Okay. And so the thief in the night, I mean, so that could connect to Trump returning. So I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these verses, I think sometimes Trump could fulfill them, or Biden. Like, there's the thief in the night could be a picture of anyone who's trying to steal the messianic worship of people. Okay. And so that could be either Trump or Biden. And then Obama is probably in there too. And, a whole bunch of other people too. Um, but then I thought too, one thought I had with being around Christmas, like a thief in the night, of course, this doesn't make sense, could connect to, like Santa Claus. Of course, that doesn't really make sense because he gives presents. But it is kind of interesting that they, with the Santa story, that it, it, that it does involve this guy coming at nighttime in the middle of the night. So that's kind of interesting. And then the thing about peace and safety, same thing where like I see a Biden fulfillment and I see a Trump fulfillment, because we definitely have Biden's running around trying to get ceasefires and two-state solutions, and so that's him running around trying, saying peace and safety. But we also see Trump's peeps are also saying peace and safety, because a lot of them are talking about that now with Trump being president, we're getting a reprieve, during his second term of Trump. Okay. And so, like everyone's saying, we're going to find peace and safety under Trump. Okay. So they're saying it too. Okay. And it's delusional, by the way, if you think they're not remembering. Okay, so remember all the drama? They don't remember all the drama when Trump was first president. I mean, how many times did the government shut down while Trump was president? There wasn't peace. It was very unsettling when Trump was president. Um, so they're delusional. Okay. And then I wrote, wake up. Okay. Because, so God says, but since we are of the day, let us be sober. And then in Matthew 25, it says, be on the alert then, for you do not know the day or the hour. And so I kind of think a lot of that is a warning to, like God's saying, hey, wake up, people, because you don't know the day or the hour. You're not recognizing that you're in the time frame of the return of the Messiah. So wake up. Okay. And then we read in Matthew 24, the parable about, or the evil slave, where the evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time, and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, which, interesting, look, that's verse 50, okay? And at an hour which he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So so I'm wondering, I think this could apply to both Trump and Biden, okay? Because first of all, we have Biden beating his fellow slaves, with, he's doing, he's angry and is lashing out in America at the end of his presidency, um, you know, so that's his way of beating his fellow slaves, and trying to force some peace deal with Israel, um, so just doing a lot of stuff like that. And then we have Trump too, eating and drinking with drunkards, all the people that he's building his cabinet with. Okay. And then, because definitely Trump's saying my master's not coming for a long time. That's why, God needs him to be the savior, is kind of what he's saying. And so, anyways, and okay, so then Okay, and I just wanted to make the point about in that place there be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So we've always applied that to like hell, weeping and gnashing of teeth. But that could also connect to the Civil War, the final Civil War, that weeping and gnashing of teeth would happen during the Civil War. Okay. Where the hypocrites are, basically. And then so we read about the eighth king in Revelation 17. He goes to destruction, okay? And then I already talked about the 10 horns. Okay, the 10 horns and the beast, these will hate the harlot. And so the 10 horns and the beasts, that adds up to 11, by the way. Okay. Which I said 11's the number of judgment. These will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. So, at first I thought maybe like the harlot was Harris, but it also could just be, like fallen America under Biden. Okay. So burn her up with fire. Okay, so just speeding up things with the baker and the so I just put in the baker's dream where he had 3 baskets of white bread on his head, and I think 3 baskets could connect to Biden's 3 peace deals. But in his top basket, the 3rd peace deal, the birds are eating the bread. Okay. And so actually they've kind of said that about the peace deal with, quote, or ceasefire with Lebanon, that it's kind of a loose ceasefire. It's not, that it's still being broken. Okay, so that could be a picture of the birds. Although ultimately the birds eating the bread also connects to a picture of the baker being eaten when he hangs on a tree in crucifixion. And then I didn't know if like 3 days, because like, do you go to December 21 and then you have 22, 23, and 24? And so the third day, which is Pharaoh's birthday, could be a picture of Trump's birthday on the 24th. That's when the heads of the cupbearer and the baker are lifted up, and one's restored and one's hung. So the chief baker is hung. And then we have the cupbearer not remembering Joseph. And so I wrote, Trump and his followers don't remember Jesus the Messiah, and they try to establish their own messianic kingdom, but also they go to war against Jesus and his followers. And then, okay, so I'm just wondering, are we going to see a false Messiah on the December 24th? I don't know. Okay. But one thought I had is, what if, Trump does some kind of false Messiah thing on the 24th? And, and then it'd be a picture of like the Israelites in the wilderness. They didn't wait for Moses, but they built a golden calf. And then the next day, Moses came down from the mountain. Okay, so like, Trump and his followers do something to like establish what they think is their messianic kingdom on the 24th of December, and then on the 25th we see Jesus show up. Like if they just waited one more day. And we see that same story repeated in Saul didn't wait for Samuel, okay, and offered up a burnt offering, and then lo and behold, the next day Samuel showed up, okay. And then what's interesting with the Saul story is that like Saul's kind of this fallen king, but then there's David kind of waiting in the wings, who's a man after God's own heart. So definitely a picture of like Trump would be like Saul, the fallen king, where we have the Messiah waiting in the wings, to be like David. let's see, is there anything else I want to say about that? Oh, I did want to say, okay, so like they built a golden calf. So we already saw Trump is like putting up this picture of this golden era. If he were to become president, I mean they actually use those terms at the Republican National Convention. So that's like a picture of, and then we see in it might be Daniel 3 where Nebuchadnezzar puts up a golden statue which is 60 foot high times 6 or cubits, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. So you have those 6 numbers there with the golden statue, and then there's 6 instruments, so there's 666. So I definitely think they're putting up a golden statue with Trump. I probably won't talk about this, except, so, you could read about it. Like, I think Obama and Trump and Biden they have their 3 unclean spirits where they're gathering people for the war. And then, God repeats Jesus's words where it says, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes." Okay. Well, so you want to be clothed with Messiah. Okay. And then in Daniel 5, this is the end of the Belshazzar story. And it says, "Your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians." So another picture of like the Civil War, the division. And then we won't talk about this because I've talked about it before, except I added a few 9/11 connections for Biden. That October 24th was the 8th day of Sukkot, is the 119th week after Biden signed his paper with the PED. That was when Hurricane Helene happened. And then December 12th, I already talked about that, is 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar. Biden pardons. Oh, so it was actually 1539 people total. Which, what's interesting about that, it was like 1,500 people. We see with the flood, the numbers 15 and 150. And, so we see kind of that, like with the 1,500, it kind of connects to that. I mean, so definitely another picture of how Biden, and I have, there's things that he did on like a 15 date and 150 day. And then here, so Trump is the 6th king that's probably going to become the 8th king. The 8th king does destruction. So it's interesting because I wrote Biden 2021 to 2024, question mark, question mark, question mark. And then Donald Trump returns, question mark, question mark, question mark. Well, I could cross off the question marks because he's definitely returned. But then, so I wrote 47 equals 11. 11 means judgment. So, anyways, and then here's my slide that talks about the 1290. So Trump's DOC was 1290 days after the Republican National Committee in 2016. And then, like I said, week 70, Netanyahu out, Trump off Facebook and Twitter. Oh, those were the 2 social media things. And then also July 18th was 1290 days. So the Republican National Committee, when Trump spoke, was 1290 days after January 6th. So that was very interesting. Okay. They abolished the regular sacrifice. So that one makes kind of more sense to me, is that, normally they would have had the Electoral College vote, but they put a stop to that. And then they set up the AOD on July 18th when Trump spoke at the DNC. But even though the regular sacrifice being abolished is really probably when people trade their souls to follow Trump as a messianic figure, rather than worshiping Jesus. Okay. And then for Biden, 1290, his Saudi deal was 1290 days after the deal of the century. That was, and it was actually on Obama's birthday too. I don't have the date in here for that. But then, like I said, week 70, day 2, after Biden's Saudi deal. So I was kind of comparing it to what happened with Trump after his DLC, thinking that if Trump and Netanyahu were out on week 70, that Biden would be out on week 70. But week 70, day 2 was 12/12, Biden's, when he made his pardons, which was also a 1290 day. But I'm wondering too, because remember there's that long list that talks about what happens on the 70th week, like puts an end to sin and blah, blah, blah. And so I think Biden's pardons are like putting an end to sin. Like they don't have to suffer the consequences. Those people he pardoned don't have to suffer the consequences of their sins. I think that could be what happening, even though for Trump and Netanyahu, it actually, God actually put a stop to what they were doing. And, so what I'm thinking though, so Biden's still around, and, he didn't disappear during his week 70. But then, like I said, the 71st week after Biden's Saudi deal is a type of, was fulfilling the dates of the, Sukkot. Okay. So, and then we read about, let's see. I don't know if I'll go over this, but, we read about the gallows being built for Mordecai was 50 cubits high. Okay. And so remember I said Christmas is day 50. So that's an interesting, maybe a possible connection. And then what was interesting is the Trump Tower, is the blaze broke out on the 50th floor of the tower. Okay. So are we going to see burning on the left and burning on the right on day 50? And then and then we have Gog and Magog, so Gog comes down from the north. And so I think we already saw a type of fulfillment with Russia, being in the northern country doing a type of civil war with Ukraine. And then, the civil war in America involved North versus South. And so, I think Trump is like in the north, and then Biden is like in the south. And then they'll be going to civil war. Or are we going to see something with Iran in the north doing something? But also now with the Syrian rebels coming up, they're in the north in Syria, and they've actually talked about wanting to come down and get the Temple Mount, which they have a different name for it, the El Aqsa Mosque. They want to reclaim it for Muslims. So I don't know if we're going to see maybe that happening before Messiah comes. But we do read about 2 of Jacob's sons make him odious, so that Jacob appears weak, and then his enemies want to attack him. I don't know, we had this big fight in America about the budget, is that making us look weak, and maybe emboldening our enemies? I don't know. Um, Anyways, and those who mourn the destruction of Jerusalem will merit seeing it rebuilt with the coming of Moshiach. Okay. And so Jerusalem there can apply to both Israel or prophetically a prophetic shadow of America too. Okay. And just really quickly, we read about the iron mixed with wet clay. And then I talk about the wet clay connects to the Hanukkah dreidel. So on Hanukkah, we play with the dreidel that is dried clay. When it's dry and ready, there's no longer any sea. So God's clay, his people, are finally ready by Hanukkah. So definitely a connection with Daniel's statue. So you're all the way down to the feet and then the 10 toes, which actually the toes of the feet, partly of iron and partly of pottery, that connects to the 10 virgins story, because then the 10 virgins are divided into 5 and 5, 5 with oil and 5 without oil. So definitely interesting. Anyways, so then this picture out of time connects to the Trump Tower with a fire on the north and a fire on the south, or fire on the right and a fire on the left. So Jesus could be the one who's kind of out of time. He's above the rivers of the water in this picture. So we want to be with Jesus in the middle. Dry land with Messiah, stand by and see the salvation of the Lord. It talks about the great city being split into 3 parts. Okay, so the right, the left, and then the people in the middle with Messiah. Okay, so that's what I got for you today. Just kind of giving you a heads up of what we could be seeing maybe over the holidays, maybe over... So whenever I make these videos, I always start doubting that the numbers I've come up with mean anything. And so I don't really know what they mean. Because now I'm starting to wonder about the 7th day of Hanukkah, which is New Year's Day. Okay, so actually, New Year's Day we light the 8th candle. And then the Hanukkah menorah too, it's 9 lights total, which, connects to the Messiah. I think the 8 lights connects to... It's a picture of how Jesus and his followers survived. They were alive and remain during the 8 kings, okay, to still follow Jesus, okay. And then, anyways, so January 1st of 2025 is actually Tevet 1 on the Hebrew calendar. And that was, so we see Esther goes to the king in the 10th month. So it's hard when scripture has other dates too, that you don't know which one's really significant. And then some of the dates, like this, well, I don't know, but then like the 62 weeks after Biden was in Israel, when we'd be on the 63rd week. I don't know, but it does say after the 62nd week. So I don't really know. So we'll just have to see what happens. But I think we could be really close, really near. So I don't know if it's going to happen over Christmas or if we, need to wait through the end of Hanukkah. I'm not really sure. So I'm starting to doubt. Although there's just so many connections for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, like I said. So we'll just wait and see what happens and see how things get fulfilled. But Jesus is near, right at the door. And, um, we may not know the day or the hour, but we definitely know we're in the season. Um, I mean, you know, I could even say that I know the day because we're not the day, but I have ideas about the day, but that we're in the day of the Messiah returning. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it's similar to saying we're in the season, but season just sounds like a really long time. Um, anyways, okay, that doesn't make sense. But anyways, so I hope your holidays are blessed, and I hope that you can just um, God gives you His grace to wait and attain until the coming of Messiah. Don't give up the day before the Messiah shows up. Okay, hang in there and wait and attain to the day that Jesus actually shows up. So, so I think next year could be a really good year for us, all that follow Jesus as our King. Um, so God bless. I really appreciate you listening. Take care.